Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. I'm here today with two very special friends of mine, Allan Lewis and Jason Barefield. And we're going to be kind of talking about all sorts of things throughout our years of knowing each other, music that we've all been a part of, some writing, we have soccer. We're, all three of us are married with children. So we've got all sorts of different things that we can chat about. And I just kind of wanted to take a minute to have you guys introduce yourself. Allan, if you'll start, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're at these days, and you're up.
Right on. Yeah, my name is Allan Lewis. Thanks, Joe. I'm from Toronto, outside of Toronto. I guess I've found my way here by dint of knowing George for 20 odd years, living with him for 4 or 5. I play music, I take photos, I do a lot of writing professionally and personally, and just kind of messing around in the metaverse and NFTs and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's where the three of us all kind of triangulate. So yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me on, man. It's good to be here.
Cheers, man. Glad to have you on. Jason, flipping it over to you, buddy.
What's up? Jason Barefield here. Man, Cajun as they get. Well, depends on who you ask, man. Born and raised in Louisiana. I'm over here in Texas now. Guess I got here. I've known George for, I think we said, 15, 20, something close to that, doing most of that through music. But like everybody else, I'm sure he comes in contact with. We've all got our own story and our own special relationships. So, man, thanks for having me here and looking forward to finding out about both of y'all.
Cheers. Well, we were Jason and I were on the phone last night and we're trying to triangulate exactly our timeline of when we first met. And there was all these different, was it this show? Was it that show? And it started out, we tracked it down to a show in Jackson, Mississippi that my band Dead PA played. And Jason is a music producer and he also goes by MC Field. And so he was there performing and we kind of had a late night recording session, some interview that we did in this hotel room at like 3 or 4 a.m., which I feel like it's somewhere. You said my old bandmate Jason Walsh recorded it, so it's somewhere in the depths of our archives. But we'll have to pull that one out and see if we made any sense or anything then.
I would doubt it.
I would assume so too. But I know with Allan, we had quite a fun interaction when we first met. We were both in was it August of '97, I guess, when we were becoming freshmen at Northeastern University in Boston. And I don't know, do you want to tell the story of our first meeting?
You know what? I don't know that I remember every story of things that ever happened at Northeastern. I remember meeting you, running into you, I think in front of Spear Hall. And we were both trying out for the soccer team. And I think we just we related to each other that we were trying out for the team. And you're like, oh, what position are you playing on? Oh, I'm a goalie. And I think you said the same thing. And then we're sort of like, oh, damn. So now we're going head to head. And I think that was the start of things. I think there might be a little bit more to it, but I don't remember everything that happened in that moment. But I remember that's when we met. And that's when we kind of, locked horns as friends, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I remember there was like a freshman orientation boat trip in like the Boston Harbor. And like, I remember talking to all these other people and they're like, oh, you're here to try out for soccer. Oh, we just met the guy who's going to try out for being a goalie. His name's Allan. And I was like, oh, he's on the boat. I'm going to throw him off the boat.
Yeah. I knew that I don't even remember the boat. So that's amazing.
It's very, very, that's when I met up with our friend Dan Ricci and
that's right.
It was around that time there too. And some other friends of ours then, or people who became friends. But I just remember like hearing, okay, he's a part of the freshman orientation group. And I knew that you and I were going for the one remaining spot on the Northeastern soccer team as a goalie. And when we met up in front of the Spear Hall there, and I remember we were kind of going back and forth about, just chatting and where we were coming from. And I remember I was like, oh, who do you play for? And he's like, well, club or country. I was like, club or country? What do you mean? And he's like, oh, I play for this particular club, which I forget the name of it. Which one was it that you were playing with?
Malvern.
Yeah. And then you mentioned country, and I was like, you mean like Canada, like the national team? He's like, yeah. And I was like, I am totally going home in 3 days. The tryouts, it will not go well because I played competitively, but like I was not of the caliber that you were. And then I think we were talking about how you had the scholarship and such too. So I was like, why am I even here? Why what did he even put me on the invite list for?
Yeah,
Come
but
on, coach.
what's the back end of that story though for you?
As far as like what happened?
As far as what you set your mind to do with that team and what you ended up doing.
Well, I wanted to be a goalkeeper, right? And so I tried out with that in mind, but I had some field skills, if you even call them that. But I remember I was been training in Houston, and it was like 107 degrees like every day that summer. And so I was every day running like 4 to 6 miles and running in the pool and rollerblading because I'm super cool like that. And I basically was in tip-top shape. So when I showed up, one of the first things that Coach Ed Matz had us do is he said, you have to run 2 miles in under 12 minutes. And I think I did it in like, I don't know, 11 or something like that. It was,
I think you told me you did 11:35.
11:35. There you go.
Correctly.
11:11 sounded cooler, buddy. Thanks.
Oh shit, I didn't know it was that high. Okay, maybe that.
I'm
that
totally
sounds way
kidding.
better.
It was probably 11 something. I remember it was under 12 because the first thing he said is you have to do that. And I think we had 3 tryouts of triple days. And if you didn't finish that 12-minute mark at the very beginning of the tryouts, at the very end of the 3rd day, you had to do it again.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get that out of the way. And I think I ended up lapping one of the keepers and just beating out one of the other ones, the guys who were already on the team. There's a senior and a junior. And the coach, I think, was like, oh, you're in shape. And then I played decently as a keeper when we tried out, but they kind of threw me as a field player. But yeah, I guess, at the end of it all, they had the guy named Greg Ehrman who had hair down to like here. He's the longest haired kid on the team. And he came to me and he's like, so, have you thought of maybe, cutting your hair? I was like, what? And at the time, my hair was like mid-chest, right?
Shannon Hoon styles, man.
Yeah, I'll have to throw a photo back. Well, you had some hair there too, man. You had nice dreadies and little blonde tips, man.
Yeah.
So we were quite the 97 mix. And I ended up, asking him point blank. I was like, so if I cut my hair, do I make the team? And he's like, I can't tell you that. that no coach would ever put that on the table. I was like, okay. Yeah. So I think we had a guy, what's it, Tassinari?
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up.
Cut your hair?
I think he was the one who cut my hair. I think everybody had to go at it, and it was just horrible. The next day I had to go and get it like professionally cut, which even looked worse. It's like when you get into that area. Oh, it was bad. It was bad. Eventually, I think I just ended up cutting it all short, but that was the end of my long, beautiful hair, which has never come back since. But
the point was that you set to mind to doing something that you weren't actually planning on doing. You ended up walking on for a D1 team and not your position, which is pretty impressive.
But with the cool part about all that too is that by making the team, I got to stay in Boston because we had the tryouts, and then you're part of preseason immediately. And you had a roommate that you were supposed to have that ended up ducking out, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I don't remember who it was that was supposed to be in our apartment that coach had arranged for us, but yeah, somebody dropped out. So once you made the team and you were kind of trying to figure out, I think you might have been staying in Stetson West was where you're going to stay, or Stetson East, whatever, one of the dorms. Yep. But yeah, you were like, I just came up to you. I was like, we need another place somebody else to fill this place. Do you want to jump in?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you're like, shit, yeah.
So, I was supposed to be in like a double dorm room with like 3 kids. Basically, we're going to be like sleeping on top of each other's feet and stuff. And I was I was excited to get out of that situation. But the main reason was that at that point in time, Allan and I had connected, and we had realized we shared all sorts of different, only children, had really cool parents. We were in bands and we loved all the same music. And then come to find out that you were a guitarist and singer.
Yeah.
And so I was a drummer.
We just started kind of hanging out that way and connecting. And our other 2 roommates, Tim and Dan, were awesome dudes as well. Everybody liked music, so it was always on, and we were always just fucking around and just getting to know each other that way. It was kind of how I remember that sort of mixture of kids in that moment. It was fun.
Yeah, man. It was a great time. That was what a crazy, experience where we were. And we kind of live in like, I think there was like 100 kids or something that got to live in the apartments in like freshman year. Everyone else had to be in the dorms and stuff. So we had our hosted parties and shows that we started putting together in the basement.
Yeah. Cleared
was
out the
fun.
laundry room. Yeah.
Yeah. Pissed off a bunch of neighbors in the process.
That's
Yeah.
a great story about becoming a water boy, George. What y'all both went to Northeast on an invite?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Well,
the one.
Gotcha.
Alan had a full ride there. I think one of 3 at the time. It was so they had heavily recruited him and got him out there. I was kind of like I was sending in old VHS tapes of me very blurrily playing soccer and like begging the coach to let me play, and had a few other college. Like I had some scholarship offers, but it was like University of Maine and Machias. And I'm like, where? Like just places that were not D1 schools. And I wanted to play D1, but Boston's felt like a really cool town to be in college. I mean, there's like what, 250,000 college students within like a 3-mile radius or something. It's
it's fucking
it's
stupid.
insane.
So
It was
had either one of you ever been to Boston before that?
I'd been once for one other recruiting visit, but that was it. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it was
Wow.
just like this mystical, faraway place that, you just basically knew through stadiums and arenas, right? That was it.
That's it.
Yeah. A lot of history with sports and stuff too, that, and that actually I kind of followed a little bit because Roger Clements, the pitcher, he went to my high school. And so he was kind of the local, everyone kind of followed him in his career. And when he went to the Red Sox, I started becoming a Red Sox fan because you watch your, local buddy on the TV. Right. And I kind of started learning about the history of Red Sox and just Boston sports in general, which is huge sports town. And that was like I kind of had a connection there. So whenever I thought about it, and I was like looking at schools, Northeastern had a political science program where they had internships that went straight into the White House. And I really, at the time, wanted to get into politics. And I had the ideas of becoming the president of the United States. So that was kind of one of my goals. I know.
Hey, I'd vote for you. Honestly.
All the background information and stuff that the feds and stuff had, they told me they burned it. So I was like, oh, that's gonna be good. I'll go ahead. I know people, Jason. I know people. He's calling them up.
Yeah.
But no, I that was kind of there was a really cool political science department, and I think I ended up taking like one course that freshman year.
Didn't Mike Dukakis teach there? Wasn't he in that department at the time?
He did. Michael Dukakis. And whenever Alan and we got a job, I guess that freshman summer year, we were working for Parsons Field, the athletics department, where it was like Dano, I forgot. What's the other guy's name? Murph. I mean, these guys are like
Johnny,
quintessential Boston folks. Dano was just a hell of a guy. He had a beer belly to where he would like literally puff out his belly and he could sit his beer on it and just stand up straight. This guy was a champ.
It was a raft.
He would basically have us come out and, he'd clock us in early and stuff as long as we brought him some beers. And, I think we're past that like statute of limitations for some of these stories, but if not, then these are all false stories, everyone. But
everything's a legend.
Everything's a legend. And we went out there and I just remember working at the athletics complex out there in Brookline. It was like separate from the Northeastern campus. You had to kind of drive a couple miles and stuff. And anyway, you always see this lady out there who looked really drunk and really lost. You go over there and Kitty Dukakis. It was Michael Dukakis' wife. And we'd kind of corral her back up to the front. And Michael Dukakis would come, thanks, fellas. Remember, like Dano was like, this happens all the time, George. She comes over here. She gets a little bit on the sauce and never brings me any. So yeah, her husband comes and gets it anyway. I don't know if that was even a good Dano impression. It feels like it, maybe a little more slurred, but.
So did either of you take on the Boston accent that you always hear about? Did either one of you?
What?
I think we had it in different degrees. I could sit.
I'd love to hear yours, Alan.
I could sit in a room for 5 minutes with somebody and pull an accent down. That's just an illness of mine. So I would imagine I was sporting a pretty good one during those years. So
I'd bring it back home with me, like on vacations and stuff. It's like someone would be like, "Dude, where what the heck? You sound like one of them." And then I'd, spend 3 weeks in Texas and I'd come back, but hey, y'all, you want to come over here and get some barbecue? Whoa, what's wrong with you? Never fit in. It's tough.
Well, and so Jason, speaking of accents, how do you sort of go about navigating your Louisiana drawl versus Texas and that kind of thing? Do you get shit when you get home?
Not necessarily. What you get, I'm from Central Louisiana. It's the armpit, the asshole, whatever you'd want to call it. It's called Alexandria. But and what you've got a divide over the state where I'm from is the line. You're either going to talk like me, north, or you're going to go 20 minutes south and everybody talks a Creole, a Cajun, a French, it's really thick. And again, it's right south of where I was from. My dad's second wife was from down there, so from a little place called Ville Platte, Bayou Chico. And I mean, it was night and day. We'd go down there and the holidays would be different. The talking's different. I mean, the culture's different. Everything is just night and day. But basically, I never got accused of being from, anywhere south of that. So how they refer to North Louisiana over here is East Texas. So that's just always it. You've got, your Dallas Cowboys, you've got all your people that you would expect to be Saints fans or LSU or whatever the state, whatever you want to support in the state. It all goes out the window up here. Everything north of Alexandria there is all considered East Texas. It's just one of those things. Well, that was how I thought. And then I actually moved over here to East Texas probably 5 years ago or so. And different than as night and day, man. It's two totally different cultures. The way people talk, everything is night and day. And I mean, we're an hour and a half from the state line and it's just different. So
that's funny, man. Like I remember when I moved down to the States from Toronto, and I'd spent a lot of time in the States just playing soccer and traveling and all that kind of stuff. And you're sort of like, oh, these countries are basically the same. But as soon as I started living in Boston properly, and I'm referring Boston to the United States broadly, but everybody would ask me, so like, what's the difference between here and there? And I'm like, it's a bunch of tiny little differences that you don't see broadly. But as soon as you just start living, it's like the way the commercials kind of express different ideas and obviously speech and accent and just sort of like the ways that people will interact with you. And George, I know you and I spent a lot of time just kind of trying to get those little nuances to be like, why did I piss her off like that? Or whatever the case was. Right. And so it's interesting that you say that too, Jason, just like the disparity between, 90 minutes down an interstate or whatever can completely change your sense of place and identity, I guess, to an extent.
Yeah, for sure. No, I did that, man. I went to school up at Louisiana Tech, which is probably, 2 hours or so north of where I was born and raised, and no different. The culture's fine. Everything's fine. Went on, played a little soccer up there, just played club stuff up there. And it's one of those where, you gotta, there's a certain group that runs first club team, and you didn't grow up with them. Doesn't matter what your skill set is. So I was pretty disillusioned by that. Because I had played soccer all my life. I figured I was just going to keep playing. And once I was back at the dorm and didn't have anything to go do, I was like, well, I'm not going to do school. I mean, what else is there to do? So no, I messed around, did that for 4 or 5 years. I was in architecture up there for a while, got tired of it. Of course, that was in 98, 99, the advent of IT. I say the advent, the classes, you're starting to get more specialized classes, more specialized curriculums. I mean, when I started there, it was, mainframe teachers teaching AS400, teaching stuff that's just, it's just dragging. Well, I finally hit my stride, I guess, about 4.5 years in. So I had, all my classes, had all the, everything I needed. I just swapped over got out with a basic IT degree and never looked back on that. Worked, did a bunch of networking stuff for years and years. And then where we're situated, Allan, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the oil and gas sector down here at all.
Mainly from what George has told me, but yeah, I have a decent sense of it.
Right where I live, where I was talking about, where Louisiana and Texas meet, right there on that eastern side of Texas, western of Louisiana, you got a big shale deposit called the Haynesville Shale. And it was one of your deposits that was on the forefront. It was one of your formations that the horizontal fracturing, the fracking that came in, that was one of the major places that they really did it, really tested it. You've got wells that are 18, 20,000 feet deep where they're going down and then going across the formation like so. And that really jumped off in about 07, 08. And man, I was working for, state government. I was just fine, fresh out of school, single man, living there off $30K a year. And I was rich. That was all I needed. And that was how I was going to retire. And then one of my buddies came through and asked me if I knew anything about, mapping or oil and gas in general. Of course I hadn't. And my wife, she was in nursing school at the time. And he says, look, I'm going to take you with me, put you in a few, mapping classes, do what you got to do, and let your wife have, let her have some study time at home. And man, I haven't looked back since '08. That's all I've been doing. Just GIS work, just fancy word for mapping, just contract work here and there. But the majority of it has been for oil and gas. So I've really kind of followed that stuff around. And I've got a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and the other one will be 3 shortly. So I really had to kind of quit moving around and be stable. And in oil and gas, with most anything, it runs in cycles. So you got to chase the work, make yourself known. Being over in East Texas has been a godsend for me as far as just showing FaceTime. Same people I've worked for before, but being able to stand there, give them a handshake, do all that old school stuff, it's been major. And, keeping my food on the table for the family and everything like that. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Once I got out of school, man, I took off into that, started doing music. That's where, George and I linked up and just meeting all the different people and going through all the different walks that you can do in music, traveling, creating, just really kind of getting busy, trying to find your forte and all this. And man, I honestly, I'm still kind of lost trying to figure out where I'm at, where I'm going. I mean, I know it's got a lot to do with losing your identity and becoming somebody's dad, times 3 or times however many, but it's definitely one of those, man. I figured I'd be past this phase a little sooner, but the last little guy, he was a surprise. So he kind of
pulled you down to earth again, eh?
Absolutely. I thought I was good, man. We got the 12 and the 9, man, self-sufficient, good to go. Of course, they're both going on 21. And me being an IT person, when I got out of school, I said, no problem raising kids with technology. We're good. I've got this on lock. Man, I find out every day just how dumb I am. And not just because the kids tell me, just on the tech stuff, just the stuff that blows by me. And I'm like, man, I should have caught this. I should have done this. And really, man, just I think the information overload is what George and I were talking about the other night. Just the information overload, how you can get it from so many different sources. It not only opens your eyes to a lot of things that you didn't see before, but man, it really does. It helps you more. I call it a quest. I'll call it an adventure to figure out what you don't know, if that makes sense. The more that I figure out I don't know, the smarter I figure I am. Is that making sense? Because I thought I knew it all for sure, man. When I was a teenager, you hit 21, you definitely know it all. And then, man, just day by day, the layers of the onion peel back, and you figure out, wait a minute, you don't know shit.
Well, so I like that, man. I think the idea of getting those lessons every day or every couple of months or that kind of thing, whatever it is super important right now, especially for guys like us who I think are, working in creative fields, but also trying to explore some of this new NFT, metaverse, Web3 type of space as well, because that's about as fluid as it gets right now. Hey, but I think like when you're looking in these fields and you're talking about oil and gas and GIS and even music or whatever it is, and even being a parent, it's like if you just think I've got it all dimed and figure out, you're in a lot of trouble, because that's not the case. And I think staying fluid with the fluidity around you is really important. And it kind of brings me back to the general idea of being creative, and creative isn't just sitting down at a sketchbook or in front of your guitar, right? It's being, okay, well, to use your analogy, Jason, like this contract works up and, I'm not necessarily sure where the next one's from. So I got to circulate and I got to figure out, how I'm making myself, look good in front of so many people, this kind of thing, and doing some stuff on the side and all that kind of thing. It's just being creative, right?
Yeah.
And making the most out of what you got and recognize that you're probably smart and going from there, right?
Well, you got to convince these little people that follow you around the house. You got to convince them that you're smart, whether or not you believe it or not. And to me, that's been the hardest thing. You look back on your parents and you're like, wait a minute. So you didn't know shit either and you had me convinced? It's definitely a guessing game day to day, man. I've got my 3-year is different as night and day, man. My oldest, we like to compare him to Sheldon. You familiar with Big Bang and all that? So he's young Sheldon through and through. Wants to talk to you about everything. When he was 7 or 8, we were riding in the car one day and he's like, Dad, look, I got to talk to you about this stuff that we're seeing in the Bible at church. I'm like, all right, let's talk. And he's just like, number one, he's like, you're not going to convince me that that they made a whole human out of somebody's rib. That's just the first thing. And he's like, we're not going to stop. We know whales don't eat people. We know they're herbivores. So, something's wrong there. I mean, just everything is as literal as it can be. The second one, he's just like me, man. Whatever. If you want to tell me that the whale ate Jonah, fine, go for it. Just let's quit worrying about it. And let's go game. And of course, the third one, he's just like, I don't care what's right and wrong. Just hear me. Just hear me. And I'm just standing back going, y'all need to believe me because of this. Y'all need to believe me because of that. And then, you know, just one of those things. But no, man, I won't get caught up in that too much more.
Was it your youngest who didn't want to leave the house the other day without a top hat and a cane?
No, that was the middle. That was the middle one. The top hat, the cane. I've got plenty of other pictures that I need to send you. I mean, just particular down to his school uniform, you know, rolling up his little hoodie. He's got to have an even number of rolls on his sleeves. He's got to make sure that his hood sits right here. And he had to get it from mom because he definitely didn't get fashion from me, obviously. But yeah, it's, and so many times I ask myself, why are you worried about that? What, hang on, what? Why? And that's my whole thing, man. Why? And I need to just quit asking that, just go with the flow. So
he's expressing himself, man.
He's definitely expressing himself. And I think that's the major part of it. Cause my dad was very, so he's a federal agent. So I definitely had a very strict upbringing. It was me and my brother and him. And just everything was by the book, cut and dry. I mean, most people are growing up with, you know, Sports Illustrated or whatever it is sitting on the back of their toilet. I've got these FBI books on how to read body language, you know, and, you know, when I'm, you know, if you're lying, you look up to the left or whatever it is. And I'm sitting there, of course, you know, I'm trying to lie to him about something. And he's obviously put the book in there for a reason. And I'm doing all this shit that's in the book. And he's like, yeah, okay. You're a real smart one. But it's, man, it's, he loves bringing stories like that up to them whenever he's got them, you know, hey, your dad's an idiot. Don't let him convince you otherwise. And
like, stop.
Those might be my three biggest cheerleaders though, man. No, he's not an idiot. If he is, he's my idiot. I'm like, okay.
That's why dad doesn't visit often anymore.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
We'll see him for an hour.
But no, man, he as strict as he was, that's why I brought him up, man. He absolutely pushed my creativity and pushed me in a way that you wouldn't think that somebody with a, you know, with law enforcement training would do, because a lot of that's by the book or should be. But yeah, man, he definitely pushed the creativity envelope. I mean, I'm walking around. I skateboarded a lot in high school. Of course, I'm wearing your big. I'm not looking like everybody else was at the time. And the small community that I was from, you know, if you looked the part, you're on drugs, you're on whatever. And you know, when graduation day came, I was up there. I was giving a speech with the valedictorians, and so many of the parents are just looking at me. They're like, what's this guy doing up here? What are we doing? You know, you can't hang out with my kids and all this. And that's what it was. My talk was on individuality, keeping it real, keeping it yourself and doing what you do no matter what. And it was an eye-opening experience for a lot of the parents that were there, because they came and talked to me after it. Just so many of them admittedly, look, man, I just threw you out. As soon as I saw you up there, I figured, you know, you were a bad influence on my kid, and you're one of the top kids in the class. I'm like, hey, I read a book just like your kids, no big deal, you know. But just a lot of them told me that, you know, just you up here doing this, it's given me the, you know, the view on that I need to open my eyes a little bit more and not judge a book by its cover. And I thought that was a cool thing for a small town. Of course, that definitely added to the I know everything kind of thing, and put my confidence way up here. And man, I thought I had it all, like I said, until I got up to the university there, and that's when you really kind of start seeing stuff. But hey, man, that's what it's there for. So he pushed the creativity. I stayed in architecture for a while, did a lot of art classes, did a lot of quite a few architecture classes, just quite a bit to know that wasn't what I wanted to continue doing, but I did want to keep at the creative side. So I think that's where the music came in. And that was actually an accident too. I started off with, you know, the graphic design, doing the, you know, album covers, flyers for everybody, and just kind of doing that. Tailed along with a couple of my buddies over to the studio a couple of times and just said, man, this is fun. Just sitting in there, not just doing music that I like. You're working with country Western artists. You're working with, you know, your EDM artists or whatever they were calling at the time. You're working with all these different talented musicians. And it really gives you a chance to see creativity on another level and just opening your eyes to things that you may have just thrown out the window. You know, if I hear a country station on, I'll just turn it. But now I've actually listened to some of the musicians, seen all the things that go into it, man. You really just want to sit back and take in everything as a whole. So I think every situation that I've been put in since then, good or bad, has been a good learning experience. So
yeah, that music stuff that you're talking about and being in and amongst different musicians was a big big thing for me, kind of high school and university too, right? Because you're picking up all these cues, and whether it's from one little subculture or another, it's just shit that you never thought of, and suddenly see, oh, this guy or this girl's doing that or doing this, and you get kind of attached to that. Sometimes those cues are more sort of outsider cues, right? And that goes back to what you were talking about with your valedictorian address, or the address that you gave with the valedictorian crew. Just the idea that, outsiders may have a certain look and feel, but oftentimes that's just because they're thinking differently, not thinking better or worse.
Absolutely.
And I remember going back to the early Boston days, like that was one of the things that George and I first clicked on, and also clicked on with some of the dudes that we first started hanging out with. We were just like, oh, okay, like there are just maybe a few visual cues that you just kind of latch on to be like, I think we might maybe understand some of the same things that each other are thinking or maybe interested in. And, when you're, 17, 18, 19, you kind of have more gas about you to go up to somebody and be like, hey man, do you like this band? Cause I kind of think maybe you do or whatever. And then suddenly you've got a 25-year friendship. You know what I mean? Like,
so I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's good. It's good. Continue.
Did you have any sort of professional music training or anything before?
I went to an arts high school,
Okay.
and I had some classical piano training, but other than that, it was just, I learned how to play guitar with my buddy JP, played in a band in high school with him and some other friends, and just same story as most, just picked instruments up and kept going at them. I was lucky to have a pretty good ear and be able to just pick tunes out and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been, I think, the reason why I've been able to play music as long as I have, because I'm not technically amazing at anything that I play, but I can hear things really well, right? So that was a lucky thing for me. And leave it to people. And that's the nice thing about when you start getting into these mixtures of people, right? And start learning how other people play and playing in different bands, is there are people who are just insane technically. And you're like, holy shit, like we're so lucky to have you in this band, or the two of you in this band. And then there's other people kind of in the corner with their hair over their eyes. You can tell they're just thinking through everything. And it's neat how the kind of personalities manifest differently. And I know that both of you kind of know what I'm talking about in that way, because you can have somebody pegged real fast when you see him or her at first, and then you get them into the room and you start going through some of those processes that are pretty familiar regardless of the situation that you're in, and you really get to see what people are about. That's one of the things I've always loved about playing music, and also even going further afield to different creative fields as well, is just seeing how people how their personalities come through when they're doing that type of thing.
So did you and George actually have a band together? Did y'all ever play together?
Okay. Greatest band ever.
Greatest band ever, Tape Recorder 3.
Is that the name?
Yeah, that was the name. So we played for, I think it was four-ish years, basically just got up every Saturday morning and made a racket in the kitchen for an hour and a half, and then went out and got drunk pretty much. So
or both.
Like a good show.
Yeah, exactly.
We started like, I remember I didn't have a drum kit up there, right? I had just traded in a kit when I left Houston to go up to Boston for school. And I had one at the house, and I was like, man, that's going to cost a lot to ship it. And I just remember my freshman year, I bought some sticks at like Jack's Drum Shop or whatever it was out there. And I was just playing, I was just beating like on the newspaper dispensers and like all the little like ad stuff that they had out there. And this guy pulls up and he's like, you a drummer? Yes, sir. Want to buy a drum set? I'm like, well, this is like the equivalent of like being in the hood. Hey man, you guys want to buy something? I was like, you got a drum set in that car, sir? And he's like, got one in Western Massachusetts. You want to drive out there with me and pick it up? And I was like, yeah, sure. This sounds safe. The guy tells me he's got a 52 Slingerland kit, and he's like, yeah, come on out. And he's like, I'm looking to sell it. He had like a foot injury, and so he couldn't like play anymore. Like his ankle was just like jacked up. And so he ended up selling me this kit like super cheap. And so then we like brought it into the middle of our room, which when we lived at 311 3C, 311 Huntington there, we took over the living room because Allan had a loft. And so like because he got a loft bed, it wouldn't fit in the other two bedrooms. So we turned one of the bedrooms into our living room. The other bedroom was where Tim and Dan stayed. And then Allan and I had kind of the bigger room and stuff. And thank you for having a loft. That was nice, a little extra space. And we like had the drum set up there and stuff too. And they have these like little foam pads you can put over the drums to kind of dampen the sound. Well, we took those off when we moved to the second house we lived in over at 80 Hillside. Yeah, about Hillside Market there in Roxbury. Just it's basically a little tiny suburb. It's like I don't know how many, like few exits down on the T from northeastern area.
That's right.
Took off those foam pads in, and we would jam. And I remember too, like one of the first times that we had gotten in there, and we knew that we were probably pissing off all of our neighbors. It's like a 3-story house, and it's like a kind of a duplex style. It's like kind of diagonally cut because on a corner. So there's 6 different, groups that are living there. And I just remember like we were playing, all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. Like, oh, here are the cops. The fuzz are here. And like walked up to the front, opened the door, and there's this guy with a big old like Screech looking afro, and he's got a bass and a 6-pack. Sounds like you guys need some low end. We're like, who are you? Like, I'm Mike Irwin. I live on the 3rd floor. We're like, yes, this is great. Get on in. So he comes in. And he's another one of our 25-year lifelong friends that
and that's how it started.
That's how it started with our little trio of noise. But yeah, with TR3, tape recorder 3, it was Allan and I. Basically, it was just the 2 of us. And then we at one point in time, I think we pulled in Mike Serino, who Allan works with House of Attention. Now we'll get back into that in a sec. But I just remember him showing up, and it's like you've seen that old skit too, where Spinal Tap, where he's like, this one goes to 11. Like that was Mike Serino. Like his amp was at 12. Like this guy, he's a loud personality. He came out, and I just remember like it took our band to the next level. And I can't remember if he was the one who played with us. We De La Soul played a springtime festival, and we played right after that. We said they opened up for us, but who played bass in that gig?
JP played bass for that.
JP,
gig.
Okay, your boy down, from Toronto. Okay,
that's right.
So I don't even know if we ever played with Mike Serino.
We did. We played out. Oh God, I think we played on his back patio. He had a show back there. We played there once, and I think we might have played one other gig with him somewhere. But we played a couple times with him.
Yeah. Okay.
Played a couple songs with JP before the cops came.
We were rocking.
That was the end of that.
Nirvana's Mr. Mustache. And I just remember like it was the 3rd song we had. Cops show up and shut down the party. I don't know why. It was only like 250 underage kids that were drinking, and a lot of noise complaints at the same point in time. But I think we did it well. We played
sweet 7 minutes.
It was awesome. It was the best 7 minutes of music ever in the history. And if you weren't there, you just don't know. You missed out.
So Allan, you handled all the vocal duties in this band, or you were letting George?
I did, yeah. I sang and played guitar in that, and I think we both kind of swapped hands with writing tunes and that kind of stuff and putting everything together. So
nice.
It was fun, man. It was just like both of us just kind of learning how to write songs, and both of us learning what it was like to be, I guess, a musician more properly than just somebody who fucked around with guitar. And it was about the softest landing possible to be in a band with, because we were just like, let's try this.
Yeah.
And it usually sucked, but sometimes it was cool. And we just had fun, and, neither of us were judging each other. So that's, usually how good things start out anyways. Right. So
yeah.
It was a ton of fun,
man.
Well, then you went on and moved into a little more serious of a band with Malvern, with
that's right.
Dan Ricci, Mike Irwin, and JP was a part of that too.
JP came down eventually. Yeah, we started playing. Danny and I started playing in his bedroom in his apartment down the road at Hillside, just fucking around on Friday nights because I'd been writing some tunes, and Danny was a drummer, and so we were playing around with those, and we were going to record. And then Irwin was an engineer at that point. He was like, "Oh yeah, well, I'll record you, and I can come over and play some bass." I can't remember the story exactly, but he basically came over and was like, "Oh, these tunes are pretty cool. Let's kind of try this out and maybe record things a little bit more properly." So eventually we ended up going up to my parents' cottage on Lake Huron, and I think we had 7 or 8 songs that we put together, and just spent 4 or 5 days up there, just again learning how to be musicians. And Mike, I think, kind of using a lot more skill than we thought he had at the time, but also probably learning a little bit on the fly. And just so that slowly started to come together, and JP came into the band, and Jay's one of those guys that just has that really great musical sense, and he's technically very gifted at the guitar, and it's just like, no, that's the wrong part. No, that's the wrong part. I'm going to do this. You fuck off, shut up. You're not doing that there. And, so all of a sudden he kind of gave everybody permission to be mean to each other, I guess. And that's usually a better way of working with musicians, when you can kind of speak your mind and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was a great band to be in for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I call myself musician. Look, I might have been in some groups with some people, but yeah, I say no talent, no training, nothing like that. And the people that I've been fortunate enough to work with have been those wizards, have been those gurus that are I just do what they tell me. And that's all it is, and of course, whenever it's coming out, I'm going, this sounds like trash. This is no good. And then when you hear what they come up with on the back end, how did you make that out of that?
But the one thing that I all remembered about that, to your point, Jason, is that every time you thought that what you were putting out was trash,
yeah,
if somebody didn't tell you that it was, or if maybe somebody was like, oh, maybe just try this, it was almost always meant that it was a good idea, right? Or it was at least an idea that they liked, And so as much as you thought that they were adding all the spice, 9 times out of 10, they're on the other side being, okay, yeah, I know what I can do, but like, oh, that person's idea was wicked. There's always other side to the coin when you're collaborating with people like that.
Well, you just sit there whenever you're working with those people. You know what I'm talking about. The guy that you were saying is picking this and doing that. Like one of my DJs that I worked with, he graduated from Full Sail to music college down in Florida. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he graduated, I think it was 2 degrees from there, whatever it was. And I mean, just insanely technical and turntable wizard, could do it all. And I caught myself at several of our performances just watching him. He's back there doing his thing, and I'm supposed to be up front, keeping everybody in tune. And man, just watching the guy, just watching what he's up to, seeing how he practiced, seeing how it was actually, being put out at the show. And you're like, that's a vision. That's something that you've got to have to be able to do this. I was like, I'll get in the booth and scream or do whatever I need to do. But yeah, he definitely knows how to put the mustard on it. So that's a cool thing. It's a good opportunity to be able to be around people who are that skilled. You know what I mean? I've definitely been in the room with several bandmates, other bands that I was just there, whether we were recording them or whatever it was. And you saw that they didn't have a leader, and it definitely showed. So I've been fortunate in that aspect. So
was that Cloud Me Figures? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I think that lightning can rub off on you is all I was going to say.
Yeah.
In terms, it can really inspire you and push
it really
you.
Can. It's the inspiration. It's things that I did in the studio with those couple of DJs that, I wasn't ever able to reproduce on the back end anywhere, not, and I guess it's the motivation I get. Yeah. It's just like playing up to competition, whatever that may be. Like, you like to play people who are skilled out there. So I was telling my son the other day, he's in Taekwondo and he's not, he's orange. He's some lower belt, and he's out there sparring and doing what he's got to do with some of the higher belts. And that's his thing. He's like, man, I just want to spar with white belts. That's it. And that's what I'm trying to explain to him. You fight up to your competition. So it's everything's a lesson here.
That's kind of like what I was talking to my youngest about the other day too. It's like, you never want to, it's very rare that you're going to be the most skilled at whatever it is that you're doing. There's always going to be one person that's at the very top, and it's a very, very elite platform. And, it's you're not going to be the very best soccer player or, football or whatever, chess player, like whatever it is that you're doing, to be the very top best, like it's very difficult. And like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, right? Like, you want to surround yourself with other people who are going to be able to take you to that next level. And, also with sports too, I'm like, look, you need to train against this player who's better. That is going to make you better. Like, you have to challenge yourself. And, without that uncomfortable feeling, there's no growth. And I think a lot of folks these days, they forget that idea of that. It's like, even like being uncomfortable, even like, being bored, even, not having a phone in front of you for, like for 5 minutes. What do you do? It's okay to be bored. It's okay to do this, or it's okay to not, be the best at a sport. And it's good to challenge yourself. It's okay to get the 4th place ribbon instead of the 1st. My daughter wanted to, I was telling her too. I was like, okay, went to this camp and there's like a shooting competition, and she came back home and I was like, did you get any ribbons? Cause I give them the first 3 places, and she really wanted to get a ribbon. She's like, I got these 3 first place ribbons. And she's like, but the 4th thing, I didn't get a ribbon at all. And next year I'm going back. And like, that was her motivation, was to like clean house. And I was like, well, it's good that you made these things, but she still wasn't satisfied. She wanted to get to be the best that she could be too. And I was like, don't forget, a lot of these types of sports and whatever it is, like you especially with like, some sports like where you're running or whatever, there's a time that you got to work on your personal best. It's not about what the other person's doing. Did you improve from last week to this week? There's something you can mark down. Did you, whatever it is, maybe it's, guitars or drums or, music, whatever. It's those stages of being able to mark off like your development, and you can then kind of, be able to feel a little more confident from that. Because you put yourself against the best, it's kind of hard to kind of gain your confidence if you're getting your ass kicked all the time.
Yeah, it's always good to it's always good to be humbled, right? And you can spend time sort of thinking, oh, I'm pretty close to the top of the class here, or whatever it is. And to your point, Joe, when you meet those people who are better than you, and you fucking guaranteed will, it's a humbling thing. But it's a good lesson to learn that there are always people who are better at you than what you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing. And if you don't have that, you're either insane or you live in a very remote part of the world, because there's always something. And that's what I'm trying to teach my kids right now. Is just the opportunity to be humbled is actually just that, right? It's a great opportunity. Doesn't always feel good, doesn't always feel right, and it's often not what you're expecting, because a lot of the times it happens really fucking fast, like especially in sports, like somebody's just that much bigger and faster than you, and they whip by you, or you're training with somebody in Goalkeepers, again, just 10 times faster than you or whatever, and you're like, holy shit, like that happened so quick. I went from being like top of the pile to being like way down there, and it's a hard feeling. But man, if you don't get some of those experiences, particularly when you're younger, I think the fall can be a little harder when you're that much older, right?
I can definitely attest to that. I think that's what happened once I was telling you, man, once I didn't make the squad up at Louisiana Tech. I think because everything had just been kind of good to go. Everything had been smooth, and anything I referred to as adversity up until that point never hit me like that. And then once it did, right. I mean, you're off at school, you're off doing whatever, and it's definitely a reality check whenever you're there, and then you're there, you're at the bottom, you're by yourself. I say you're at the bottom, you're not where you used to be, and you're by yourself, you're in a new world, you're out there trying to figure out how to make it work, man. And I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me, honestly. I still don't know, what the end result would be or why or any of that, but I think if I would have kept on the way that I was going, there's just a certain, silver spoon kind of thought that you think of what's all handed to you and what's not. So
they're tricky moments too, man, because like what you're describing, sort of having that experience happen, and your dad or your mom wasn't there to kind of pick you up or whatever, you're by yourself, you're trying to figure out all this other shit with university, never mind soccer team. The moment's tricky because it's down to you to process it with a relatively young brain still, and make something out of it, right? And really what you're doing in that little band is being resilient, or at least attempting to be resilient. And there's a lot of ways that can go, right? Particularly at that age, you can be like, fuck it, get me a 30 pack and let's go. Or you can be like, let's get the 30 pack, but let's wake up tomorrow and also figure out, the next thing that I'm doing, or at least start thinking about other stuff, right? And not just wallowing and dwelling. And again, I think it just goes back to that being such an important lesson for people to learn and to continue to learn, is that
right,
always ways to get better. And it's the getting better that is actually, for me anyways, the most important part of that process.
The journey of it, man, the learning of it there. A lot of things that have changed my perspective, and it's actually different people's perspectives, getting, meeting people like George, meeting people like you, just seeing how you do it. Like I had a question for George when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, whatever it is, and I'm sure I want to ask you the same thing, but what motivates you? What is it? What is it that has you taking that next step, that you don't want to just stop with the 30 pack, just sit tight, I'm good? What causes you to get up the next day and move, aside from your daily, your kids, whatever it is, the things that you have to do? What's inside you that pushes you to get up? I was asking George, are you afraid to die? What is it? Is it that simple? Because he's obviously my motivation on a lot of fronts, because, you can get tired and you can get in a cycle, and definitely having somebody to talk to, somebody to see what they're doing, not to compare, but just like we were talking about, somebody to give you that influence, to be for you to be inspired by. that's a major thing. And I think that's why we went off on that tangent that day. Just, I'm trying to figure out what is it, because sometimes you get stuck in a rut. Sometimes you're on your own trajectory, but you want to reach out. You want to see what causes people to get up and do what they've got to do. What's the urgency?
Yeah, man, I think that the motivation is a huge thing. And the funny thing about it is that by and large, it can change, right? As you get older, I would have answered that question in my 20s would have been about, playing soccer, being an athlete, and then shortly thereafter being a musician. And I think moving into my 30s and now into my 40s, again, that answer has kind of changed. And I land at right now with just being occupied with different things and being able to look back to my own output. And I'm not particularly career minded. I sort of need to, I guess, have a certain threshold or standard of income and work. But beyond that, that's not it for me. For me, it's more about my personal output, and really just kind of being busy with that work, right? And I think there's a difference between being busy and being busy doing things. And for me, like, you can be busy, watching a ton of soccer, which I like to do, but you could be busy sitting down watching all sorts of TV and that kind of stuff. But those are 3, 4, 5 hours of a day sometimes where you could be writing, you could be having the types of conversations you're describing, you'd be having this conversation, you could be sitting down and editing this conversation for your output. So for me, I think a reductive answer would just be generating output and things that I can be proud of having done. Because as nice as it is to sit down and watch a TV series, sometimes I can't point to that in 5 years to Felix or Rosie, my kids, and be like, hey, that's what I did. You know what I mean? And the output doesn't necessarily have to be good for me. You know what I mean? Like, I obviously aim to have it be good, but the output just has to be the doing of things. Because when you're doing, then you go back to some of the stuff we're talking about. You're learning things. Mm. You're usually collaborating with people, even if it's just like, hey, Jason, check out these photos. I'm trying to put together a collection. Can you just look at them for me? Tell me which ones you like, which ones you don't like. You're learning from that. I'm learning from that. So all those kinds of things. Or if it's like, dude, that, you need way more compression on that vocal. I can tell right now. I wouldn't even have known what compression was if I hadn't met Mike Irwin. Yeah. But it's those simple things when you're just sort of, by doing something and then sharing it with people, either because you want feedback or just because you're sharing with it, you're always going to learn a little bit more. Sure. Because you're always going to get their input back on what you're doing. And I love that. And it's what fuels my relationships for the most part, is just hearing what George is doing, hearing what you're doing, hearing what other people are doing, and then just bouncing shit back and forth off each other.
Right.
And I want to get into some of those projects you talked about, but one of the points I was just thinking about when you're saying that too, is that at the same time that you're doing that and you're doing it for you, you're also the inspiration for your kids. I mean, because we're at that stage too, where they got a front row seat on the things that we're doing, whether it is that you're putting out one of your photo zines or one of your albums through your solo stuff, Vandersar, whatever that may be, that
dope name, by the way.
Thank you. It's a legendary Dutch goalie.
Oh, I'm familiar. George threw that name at me, and I said, Edwin. He's like, oh yeah.
Nice.
And nice. I didn't really connect the dots, and for whatever reason, when I was in London, I remember seeing a water bottle with Malvern on it, and I was like, oh, maybe you got it from there. I forgot that it was your soccer team. So basically, any musical thing that you ever do has to have a name of some soccer player or team involved, right?
That's a hard, fast rule. It's the only way I can exist.
Well, I think Jason and I are going to come up with some fun names for your next, or maybe our triple, like our musical combination that we're going to do together. But that's a neat thing for our kids to be able to see us still, putting things out there. Like, I remember talking to one of the parents the other day, one of our youngest, it's a friend of theirs parents. And he was kind of, I mentioned something about the podcast that I'd kind of, he's like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? I was, I'm editing this podcast. He's like, you do a podcast? And he's like, what? Like, and it was, I think, more the shock of like creating something like that. And because I didn't even talk to him about like the content, which is, all over the board. But the idea of like an output, like of doing something outside of working your 9 to 5, coming home, being a soccer coach or whatever it is you're doing at the end of the day. And, then you putting your kids to bed and, cooking and cleaning and kind of repeating and everything like that. And kind of, because kids, definitely have a lot of our time in our schedule. But I gravitate towards my friends, and, like we all talk about different things that we're all doing together, or the things that we want to be able to create. And I have a lot of friends that are still doing things like that. And I have some friends that are kind of doing the same thing that they were doing in high school. It's like, it's kind of and that's fine for them. We're all on different paths and places. And we still have a good time. We chat and get together. We just might be in different worlds. Cause I think once you become a parent, it's like it kind of separates you and your timeline from your friends that don't have kids. And it's just a different kind of ball game. And either you understand it or you don't. And it's what it is. But to still have a lot of my friends, that inspires me when they're working on things. When, and Allan's like, sending me a copy of his photo zine. I'm like, man, he's getting out there. You're taking pictures, you're traveling around, you're putting together this thing that I remember. It's, cause the idea of like the kind of a self-printed magazine of, whether it's art, comic stuff, photos, or whatever, even if it's just your own propaganda, whatever things. I mean, it felt very like 90s, like it's what you grew up with, man. You get like,
well, it is what we grew up with, all that kind of stuff, right? And that was that aesthetic you're describing is a big inspiration for everything that I do. And that's why I always click with the way that you've described how Jason, how you kind of go about your stuff. It's very like, nobody gave me permission to do that. Nobody gave me permission to set up this show or to go out and take these photos and then put them into a book. I just did them because that's a great way to connect with the way that, you interpret the world. And then also a great way, like I was saying earlier, to connect with friends. And I think that's why guys like us kind of relate on that level, because even if we maybe name it differently, we all understand it intuitively, that's, largely what we're trying to do. And it's exciting and it's intoxicating. And yeah, it's one of the main drivers for me anyways.
So this is current, this photo zine?
Yeah. I've been making them for 4 or 5 years, but I was shooting a lot of hardcore shows back in like 2017, 2018, and just kind of put together the best ones and rip them off and put them out. So
I'm subscribing to this.
Yeah, no, I'll flip one over to you, man.
Nice.
It's small little runs of stuff, right? Because
hey, man,
but it's fun to do, and it's just another project. And like George, like you were talking about, it's like you put the photos up on the wall, you're editing them, and then Rosie walks in. Well, what are you doing? Well, you have to explain that process to them and what it means, and then they get to go off and interpret that however they want. And that's one of the coolest things about being a parent right now, is watching them just sort of process the things that are happening in the house. And I try to put myself back back 30 years into my own shoes, and sort of, I'm about Rosie's grade 4 now. So that's around the time that I really started to be really aware of being a human, I guess. And so I'm just constantly like, I just want to ask her so badly, like, what are you thinking about? Like, what does this house feel like to you? What does it mean to you when, when I'm walking around with a can of beer? What does it mean to you when we go past this building? All those things that you remember from your childhood. Like, I'm just so fascinated by that. But I just think it's so important to, at least, like you were saying, Joe, just kind of set that example of doing things. And I think it's crazy when you talk to people, if it's at practice or whatever, and they're often surprised by the doing. And usually they have their own doing that you wouldn't imagine that they were up to either, right? But it's just fun to be able to explain that to people, and to surprise people with the things that you're doing, because at the very least there's a conversation there, and you might get to know someone better one way or another.
Well, I think that may be a good way to, George, I know this is your deal and I know you're steering it, but I think that's a good description on any sort of NFT conversation I've had with anybody over the past year. Is let me just try to describe it to them, and then really figure out how dumb I sound, because I figure, right, I only know what I need to know on the things that affect me in this, because there's, so much information available. But when I get done telling people about it, I'm not always facing the, but when it started, it seemed like it was two schools. You either had people who were in favor of NFTs or not, and they really hated it if they didn't. And I mean, serious blowback, people getting very upset about it. I'm like, just don't think about it or talk about it. But there's hell of a lot more than that, you know that. But just I caught myself having that conversation with several people, including my kids, and they were the most receptive to it. Well, I see what you're saying. And I mean, I'm talking about provenance. I'm talking about all of these different, you know, things, whether you're in it for flipping, whether you're in it for whatever, just to see how the younger minds took it and said, okay, I like what you're saying there. You know, it wasn't just automatically, man, I'm going to right click and save and I'm done. I don't care what you're saying about it. It was a whole a willingness to understand and learn the process. And I thought that was really cool for, you know, the younger generation. I know they tend to be more technically inclined than we are, but to see the interest in it, that's the part that really got me, you know, explaining it to people my age or people who don't have any interest in it, you know, up at the office, you know, all these oil and gas people are just dying laughing at me. They're loving it. Cause I mean, it was, I'll get into the detail of where I got started and whenever y'all want to do that, but just to see those guys walk by and, you know, one of them will hold their phone up to me as they're walking by my door. Hey, you want to buy this? You know, that kind of thing. And you're just like, all right, I see where you're going with this, but hey, man,
run that back, man, because I mean, we're all familiar. Obviously, Allan's working with, you know, kind of the W3 kind of company, and we can get into this too. I'd like to transition it along, but
yes,
run it back to talking about what NFTs are, because I mean, we say it, but there's a lot of people who might not fully understand, and even those who know the term and things might not really get it. And so, I mean, you're going to fall on the sword here. Give me some information on kind of, you know, layman's terms, or kind of walking someone through understanding NFT and maybe it's crypto, you know, connections and stuff there too. So we can kind of make sure that anything we talk about that's a little more advanced from here, maybe we can have some stepping stones of understanding.
rock on.
You're up.
Me?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I thought you were telling Allan. Look, Allan's the one in Web3, man. I think that he might be able to.
Well, I want you to talk about NFTs and such too. I'll have Allan kind of talk about that, because you were the precursor to my understanding. You kind of walked me into things, and then like there was probably some trickle down from, you know, Allan, our buddy Rob, over to Allan and stuff too. So it's kind of, you know, you kind of started this water pour. So, you know, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background on NFTs, and because you've been in that game a little bit longer than we have as well.
Well, I'll give it to you just kind of in layman's terms as much as I can. Cause I mean, that's like I was saying, there's so much information out there. To me, that's one of the biggest attributes of this whole, and I'm not going to rope Web3 and NFT together, but the whole NFT, let's call it a market, let's call it a culture, whatever it may be. There's so many different avenues to it. There's so many, you know, as far as, here's what I did when I got started in it. I started bookmarking everything, going through, fixing my bookmarks up. I need to check this daily. I need to follow this person. Got to get on the social media. Got to really hammer it out. And I noticed once a week, my bookmarks would change. The people I was following would change depending on what I was doing there. And I'll be honest, the first thing that I did, I was in it for the flipping. Because I mean, I jumped on it. I guess I got in it February or March of last year. And just, man, I don't remember if somebody had told me about it. I don't remember what it was, but the first thing I did was bought some Ethereum, went into, I guess it was Coinbase or one. Actually, where it all got started, a buddy of mine called me, you know, we were all trying to do the whole stock thing. You know, Robinhood had gotten really big. I don't think the AMC had happened yet, the GameStop, any of that. But anyway, it all was just kind of starting to flow. And of course, you know, you can get on these apps on your phone, transfer some money from your bank, and all of a sudden you're a trader. So I'm out here and I'm buying a little bit of crypto here and there, buying some Ethereum. And I started looking at all the different, you know, the L1s, the L2s, all these different levels of all this stuff. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is not just electronic money. Like, this is something way different. So let's see, there's one of the marketplaces, I guess I'd call it a leader right now. It's called OpenSea. And that's one of my buddies put me on that. He said, go buy you a little bit of Ethereum, find you some things that you like on there, and then maybe you can flip them. I was like, okay, what are we doing here? You know, what kind of things do I like?
And this is kind of a lot of things there, like NFT with non-fungible token. You have a digital image, maybe, or
Sure.
video, or some type of, you know, animation of, you know, GIF,
something that you can call a token.
Yeah. And it's like, so it's an art piece that's created, and then that's the thing that's being transferred, and you have your own digital transaction, which kind of gives you the ownership of that. And
Gotcha.
so they're like limited. I just want to make sure people are understanding whenever we're talking about like kind of NFTs, what that is. And it's like, it's an art, the digital art that is being kind of created, traded.
Yeah.
And its value is a lot of times tied to one of the cryptocurrencies. Is that, you think, like a pretty good kind of basis on that, guys?
Good description. I'm sorry for leaving that part out. So what you would, so you got your blockchain. I know you hear that everywhere. And Allan, if any of this, if I'm speaking out of school, don't hesitate to correct me on it. But
no, you're good. You got it so far.
You've got your blockchain, and basically what's happening is your blockchain is a public ledger. It's something that allows anybody and everybody to confirm what you're saying, whether or not you're saying you own something, you bought it, you sold it, you owned it at one time, whatever it may be. It's a chain, it's a ledger. You can go back and look. So that's how the transactions work. Basically, you have a wallet. You have a wallet that's embedded in your browser. Let's see, I've got an Ethereum wallet in there. I've got one called Tezos, is another cryptocurrency that I buy stuff in, that I have transactions on. Allan, are you well versed in proof of stake versus proof of work?
Ish. Proof of stake would be sort of what we are moving toward, and certainly in terms of the amount of computing power that's used to verify that a transaction happened.
And how do you verify?
Oh shit, that's a good question. So proof of work is the classic Bitcoin example, and I believe Ethereum, where basically there's a problem set on the blockchain. It's a complicated math problem, and the computers that are being given the opportunity to mine a certain amount of that currency basically go about solving that problem. And the computer who is fastest to solve that problem essentially earns the right to verify the transaction.
That's right.
Or to create, and then they get a little bit of crypto as a result. As I understand it, that is proof of proof of work. Proof of stake requires a lot less computing power in order to verify a transaction. And what they do is they batch transactions together. So they'll say, okay, there's 1,000 transactions that you as this node or this computer need to verify, rather than one transaction at a time. And they basically say, okay, we're giving you these 1,000, and I'm speaking super nominally here. We're giving you these 1,000. You go ahead and verify those. We're going to choose maybe one or two out of those 1,000 just randomly, see that you verified that correctly, and then you're going to be given the opportunity to verify that work. And so I think that's a little closer to how it works.
Yep.
I'm sure somebody can debunk that, but that having the second to think about it, I think that's the difference.
Well, that's the thing that I think, there's a lot of companies out there that they want to be able to still in this world have a good, digital footprint and kind of the carbon emissions and things. Cause a lot of these mining and these computers, there's a lot of things that are going on, a lot of energy consumption. And I know for a fact, like with Vivi, they started a company that sells a lot of stuff. They team up with a bunch of different companies, Marvel, and I mean the list is long there too. But anyway, there's all the digital assets that they're putting out there too, and they tied in with the. Do you remember the name of the group that they tied in with, Jason, by chance? It's on the tip of my tongue.
Immutable X.
Immutable X, yeah.
Yeah. So like, and the whole idea was when they were going to go through the creation of these NFTs and then the selling of them and the transferring of them, they were talking about batching these together so that they have a low of a carbon footprint as possible. And that's the move here too, is a kind of an environmental one. It's also a price one, a transaction one, because whenever they're able to batch these together, say again,
a speed one as well.
Yeah, it's fast. It's getting all these, but because there's a lot of times where you buy something and you're waiting and you're looking in your wallet and you don't see it. And you wonder, did I just get rugged over here? Did somebody just, pull this out from underneath me? Did I get and then, oh, okay, there it is. All right. That's the thing I just spent $200 on, for whatever reason. It's like, you don't know if that transaction is going to happen for sometimes minutes. It takes a while. And, it's a nervous moment there too, because you're also wondering, am I even making a good decision purchasing this? Is this a fad? But we're seeing that it's not too, and a lot of artists are, it's a new way of creating digital art and there's a lot of interactions, and there's a lot of times you buy something and you actually get an incentive to be able to maybe go see maybe a live concert, or it's, you know, you buy one of 10 tracks, you know, then maybe that gets you a free ticket to go do a meet and greet or something with this person. So there's like all these little, you know, the marketing of it is, I mean, and you know, Allan can talk about this at length, but the marketing aspects of this, you know, NFT world, crypto world, you know, W3 world, it's really kind of, we're on the forefront of something new. I mean, it's totally different, but we're also seeing a lot of the artists and things too that we've connected with in our past. You know, I know like that poster that you know, you got, Jason, you got me turned on to, and I know I got one. It was limited, and by, you know, an NFT, you basically end up getting a poster that's signed from the artist, and, you know, on your wall.
Was this the Labbits artist? Is that the guy you're talking about?
No, that's Frank Kozik. That he does have some things like that too, but this is a different artist out in Cali.
Okay, cool.
Jason, what's his name again? I know I should know
Jeff
this.
Soto.
Yes, Jeff Soto. Thank you very much.
Is that Jupiter? Yep. Is that the one you got?
Yep.
So I figure it might be easy too to kind of take you, take you know, the listeners through a transaction, something kind of how an OpenSea transaction would work, kind of how we did it, kind of, you know, what took some time, and we can put us three in that situation. Let's say George has an asset. When I say an asset, he bought, you know, whatever it was. Let's say a squiggle, and I got a story about that. I'll tell you, it's ridiculous, but he bought this thing that was a squiggle. Well, he paid $500 or however that converts to crypto at the time. I mean, you feel a lot better when you're saying, you know, 0.1 ETH or something like that instead of $500. You're like, I just spent how much on a JPEG? But okay, let's say he bought that, and I'm interested in buying that from him. So he would go to this marketplace that I told you about, whether it be OpenSea. There's plenty of them out there. Looks rare, quite a few of them. And he goes in there and he puts his NFT. He has ownership of this based on it being in his wallet. He's got the transaction. He's got the blockchain info. Everything shows that he owns this thing. And that's what this marketplace tells me, is that it's a legitimate, he's a legitimate seller. So I go in and I click on the buy button. Well, what happens is my wallet pops up in my browser and it says, hey, you know, here's your Ethereum wallet. I use MetaMask, I believe. And it says you have X amount of Ethereum in here. He's charging, you know, 0.5 Ethereum for this. Okay, do I want to pay that? Yes, I'll buy. So you hit sign, because what you're doing in this wallet, and again, Allan, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're doing is you are signing these contracts, these smart contracts that say what they're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I've verified that George owns this. I verified that you have this amount of money in your wallet. Going to go ahead and take that money, send it over to him, and then send that asset to you, and then print all of it on this ledger, all of it on this blockchain. Of course, the process does take a little while, and that's one of the things that, you know, the Ethereum 2.0 is supposed to take care of, along with several other things. But I do a lot of transactions in Tezos, and man, it is fast and it is cheap. The gas, that's something else. There's a gas fee is what they call it. You can pretty much equate it to tax, but you have to liken it to Uber's fees, you know, whenever times are high or whatever it is. If everybody's trying to buy this squiggle that George put out there, man, somebody's going to end up paying a lot more than 0.5 Ethereum. You know, they could pay up to 1 or 1 point. Man, and when things were really out of hand, middle of last year, first quarter of last year, people were paying all kinds of money for the most ridiculous stuff. You know, that's why you've got a lot of these dead wallets that are sitting out there with all these, you know, they call them PFP. Somehow it's supposed to be profile picture. I don't know where the F comes from, but there's all these PFP projects. And, you know, I bought into a couple of them. There was a few things. I had a little money to spend. I'll tell you about that story. I'm sitting there and a buddy says, hey, you got to go buy this squiggle. And I said, well, I hear you calling it a squiggle, but I'm not sure. Allan, are you familiar with any of this stuff?
I've heard about it. Yeah, I've heard about it.
So Art Blocks was one of your really cool platforms for artists and collectors alike, but it allowed artists to, there's a whole separate deal, and we could, you know, I'm not as experienced as I need to be talking about this, but generative art versus traditional art. It's actually, it's artists who combine computer code with art. And the way that I describe it to, you know, anybody that's at the office or anybody, basically, let's say you had, you know, you got Salvador Dali in the room with you, and you want an original Dali, but obviously you can't afford it and nobody else can either. So what they have Dolly do, they have him paint several elements of all his pictures. You got a group of melting clocks here. You got burning giraffes here. You got, chest of drawers. You got all these different elements of things that could be in a Dolly picture. Then they go in with the code on the back end and say, hey, I'm setting these parameters. I want these random things done. I want, let's make it a 5% chance that he gets a burning giraffe in his picture. Let's make it a 10% chance that he gets this clock. So when you're looking at all the percentages and all the numbers before the project starts, what they do, the artist put a limit on the number of mints that you can do on these generative projects. Some of them do it at 500, some of them do it at 100, some of them 10,000, just depending. So when you think about it, you have the certain percentages of getting all these certain elements. The one that's the most rare, you can figure that out from jump. But then when the artist puts that limit on it, let's say it's at 500, you might not get the most rare output that could possibly be made from that. So you're waiting until those 300 are done. And then you say, okay, based on what's out there, I got the most rare one. Okay, I'm good to go. So it's almost like a lottery. It definitely takes me back to, opening baseball cards, just hoping that you were going to get something cool. And so as I was doing that, I kind of, let me go back a little bit. I got this squiggle thing. My buddy says, go in and buy this thing. And it's literally what you think it is. It's a rainbow colored squiggle across your page. Like it's nothing fantastic. It's nothing like that. And I believe there was probably 10,000 of them generated. I wasn't there for the generation. And that's called mint. Whenever you make something, when you generate an NFT out of nothing, it's called minting it. And that actually brings that NFT into existence, has a connection, has a tie to the blockchain. So I went in there and I dropped $600 on this thing. And man, I'm sitting there, and of course, just what he said, the transaction takes a little while. It was a few minutes. It was in the early time. So it was probably 5 to 10 minutes. I saw the money go out of my wallet and I didn't see anything for a bit. And then when I saw it, I was so underwhelmed. Just like, is this it? Is this thing going to sing to me? Like, am I going to get a print? Like, what's going to happen here? And I just sat there and that squiggle just kept looking at me. It's like, okay, after a couple hours, I said, all right, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. Make sure I can turn around and sell it for $1. I just need to get something back because I've got kids at home. I've got all this stuff. I can't with good faith tell anybody that I just paid money for a JPEG. So I sat there for a couple of days, just thinking about it, trying to forget, hoping that it didn't happen. And I went down to another floor at my office. Was going to go talk to one of the younger guys, see if he'd make me feel better. And I was just about to tell him about what a stupid move it was. And I'm sitting there and I get this email, like right when I was going to tell him. And the email is all, you got an offer on this squiggle. Why would I get an offer? I haven't even put it on a mark. Who knows that I have it? That's my main thing. I was like, oh God, somebody knows I'm in trouble. So I go in there and look, and I paid $600 for it. It says you have an offer. It was like 2.5 or 3, whatever it was. It was out of hand at the time. It was like $5,500. I'm like, okay, so this is the scam stuff I'm hearing about. My first purchase, I'm about to get scammed out of. You know what? You can have it. Take it. I don't care if you scam me out of it. We're good. So I went down there. I was like, let me just see how this works. I hit accept offer. And of course, it gives me the message. No, you can't accept. Of course not. So, well, the only problem was I hadn't initiated my account yet, meaning I hadn't sold or listed anything yet. So, okay, I need to list this thing. So do I list it for what he offered me on it, or what's going to happen here? So I just put it higher than what he offered. As soon as I did that, it allowed me to accept his offer. So I hit accept. I saw my squiggle disappear and I sat there. I was like, okay, all right, no money's coming in. Waited a little while, and sure enough, man, it was $5-6 grand, something silly. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, this money doesn't exist. I hadn't made a crypto transaction like that. I'm like, it definitely doesn't exist. Stood there for a minute, still didn't tell anybody. Man, I was hammering my phone thinking I was going to make it go faster. Just transfer it to my bank account. So it goes into my account. I'm just sitting back like, all right, this still isn't real. So I called and paid off a credit card real quick just to make sure that they could take the money. Just get this out of here. No matter what, they're not getting the money back for this squiggle. And sure enough, that happened. And I had a couple more nice flips. I was like, dude, this is pretty damn cool. So the flipping went on, whatever it was, until probably the end of last year, and everything, kind of started going downhill. But for the most part, I had some money to work with. And that was the cool part, because it allowed me the freedom to kind of go around and not have to worry about, am I buying assets that somebody else is going to buy off of me? It allowed me to buy things that I enjoy. And that opened my eyes to the whole art market. Tezos, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Tezos. It's where your artists are. There's several old school artist marketplaces. You've got one called Object. It's OBJKT. You've got, I'm not sure how to say it. It's HICETNUNC. I don't know if it's, another language. I don't know what it is. But anyway, a lot of people just call it HIC. But those two marketplaces were where I got started, but now I'm pretty much full on Tezos. I mean, I'm constantly buying stuff in there, more of an art collection than anything. And there's, major, not influencers, I would call them, just people who you can listen to, who will guide you through this market. People that have been talking about generative art since, 15, 14, 13 years, a long time before I even knew it was a thing, and a long time before it was actually made into NFTs, just digital art as itself, generative art. And man, it's opened my eyes. It's open, I've got a collection that's a lot bigger than it needs to be. But at this point, I'm meeting so many cool artists. I'm seeing their life. I'm seeing however much they want you to see, of course, but you're able to talk with these people. And I think that that's one of the major things that collecting art as an NFT, collecting digital art, allows you to do that you couldn't with traditional art. And I mean, I think I backed up my collection the other day, and I think I'm probably at 1,200 pieces. And you couldn't have that in the physical world. You couldn't collect that, not just because of the money, but the storage space and everything else. So seeing the networking of people in between this, seeing how certain artists are more successful than others that I don't think they're as talented as, but they're so good at being able to sell themselves, promote themselves. Social media is such a huge part of this. And, I'm not I don't have much to say on a Twitter, Instagram or something. I'm going to get on it and look and keep up with the artists that I like. And really that's it. But seeing that whole world open up and just in the one small vein that I jumped into and seeing just how wide open it is. I mean, seeing things from, not just your NFTs, but your DAOs, your decentralized autonomous organizations. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but it's a way for everybody to have a voice at the table. It's a way for everybody. You have a receipt. You have a ledger that says Barefield bought this. He owns this. He can sell it to you. That's my only retort to people who are coming by my office. Hey, you want to buy this, picture on my phone, whatever it is? Yeah, I'll buy it, but do you have the right to sell it, kind of thing? And that's the major thing. And, of course, I'll get all kinds of people that came up to me after I made those couple small flips. Oh, I'm going to give you some money. I need you to be my trader now. No, we're not doing that. We're just having a good time messing with technology, seeing that, like George said earlier, man, we are on the forefront of something. It's something big, but it's so wide open. It's just so wild, wild west to be able to look up and see the many opportunities that are out there for everybody. Whereas an artist, a year ago, 2 years ago, unless you're somebody super successful, and usually that doesn't happen until after an artist passes. So you're starting to see people get their flowers long before, they expire, kind of thing. And that's a major thing to me, is just being able to get in, talk to people, figure out, I really do. I like to help people. I like to see, like, there's 2 or 3 guys in Brazil that I can talk to, or that I do talk to, that are just amazing artists. These are professors. These are people who are just all across the board, walk a different walk of life than you see that I can see, but then you're seeing them create this art and you're like, wow, that's something totally different. Do you paint? Do you do anything on your own? No, I'm a coder. No, I'm this. No, I'm that. And you're starting to see not just a whole new wave of artists who are able to express themselves, but you're starting to see a community of marketers, of social media engineers, of all these different people who, without this realm, without this Web3, they're still sitting in a cube, doing their 9 to 5, toiling the day off. And it's just amazing to see, just to see all the tools that are available to people to create.
It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to explore.
Yeah.
And to mess around. And we often talk about it at House of Attention, because there's a few guys that have played in bands together or have played in bands. And we just talk again about that idea of the whole DIY ethic of it. And just don't wait for somebody else to do it. Just jump in and try it and make some of your own rules, because like you said, it is so Wild West. You just kind of go in and try a few things out. And that's one of the things that at House of Attention that's kind of driving us along right now, is just the idea of exploration, The idea, I mean, we're all experts sort of professionally in the things that we do in strategic consulting and marketing and branding and being artists and that kind of thing. But none of us are necessarily experts in the crypto space or the NFT space. I mean, you saw me stumble 20 minutes ago in describing an L2 function, right? But what's interesting about it is everybody is open to making some of those mistakes. And I don't mean mistakes when you dump $10,000 into an account, it doesn't come out, but mistakes in terms of trying new projects out, seeing what happens. Okay, let's throw this amount of money at minting this project and see what actually happens, see how many we can sell. Oh, you need to be good at social media. Okay, well, now we're going to have to learn how to do those types of things, or we're going to have to hire somebody. So there's this big learning curve that's happening around understanding the technology, which you did a great job of describing, and also understanding how you and your ideas can fit in. And that's where you see some of these, these wizards, so to speak, out there in the space who are just defining everything for themselves, being smart about the moves they make, putting out interesting assets and interesting pieces of art or interesting concepts for driving the utility of the tokens, and having a lot of success. And it's I just liken it back to being the .com days, and when people were just buying URLs and trying to figure out what a GeoCity was and all those types of things. We're at that same, George, to your point, we're at the forefront of something crazy, and it's the same thing. And I think us as sort of the generation we're in are lucky enough to be experienced enough, both as professionals and as humans, to be able to enter the space with maybe a little bit more perspective on what it means, broadly speaking.
So what you were saying, what is House of Attention?
House of Attention is a group of, there's around 10 of us. And again, we're all kind of creative consultants, we're strategists, we're artists, we're thinkers and makers, and it's a creative consultancy. And we essentially try to bridge the gap between Web 2 brands and Web 3 platforms and organizations, and sort of say, okay, well, if you're a Web 2 brand, which is basically just sort of a traditional brand like an Adidas or something like that, or a smaller group, and you want to get into the space, whether it's, just starting to think about metaverse projects, starting to think about maybe the Web 2.5 projects, where maybe you have some more kind of immersive experiential type of things that you're doing in the physical and real world. Well, we help advise those brands how to move into the space, the right partners to talk to on the Web 3 side of things, so that you can get in touch with the right developers and the people behind the right layers or the right bits of development technology or whatever it is, to form those unions that allow the brand experience that was happening in Web 2 to happen in Web 3 in ways that are meaningful, in ways that are interesting, in ways that add value to the people receiving them and the people who are driving those messages. So again, it's a lot about exploration, but it's a lot about just sort of competent strategic advice, and a lot about just sort of scratching the itch of wonder with a lot of people right now, understanding who you're talking to audience wise, understanding what they want and what they're interested in, and then attempting to provide that for them. So it's a cool little shop.
If you get, so let me say, all right, let's just say I run Adidas or whatever it is, and I come to you and I say, hey, I need help getting from 2 to 3. I need to see what we would look like. Give me an example of somebody that was.
So a great example would be taking a project that you may be interested in launching. So maybe if we're using the Adidas analogy, it's something like a sneaker collection. And if I were to say to the two of you right now, what would an NFT sneaker look like? You would guaranteed tell me it's fucking made of gold, it's shining, there's lasers, and it's rotating around. And there's your NFT. I'll take $500 for the common model, right?
Yeah.
But what we're doing at House of Attention, and this is again going back to George's point about sort of that frontiersmanship, is saying, okay, let's park the spinning sneaker over here and let's talk about what it actually means to be a fan of Adidas. Well, being a fan of Adidas means you probably like certain types of street culture. You probably are interested in certain types of street art. You might be a soccer fan. You might be a bit of a basketball fan, a Kobe guy or something like that. What is all that wrapped up in? Is it wrapped up in music? What aspects of commerce is it wrapped up in? Okay, so now that we kind of understand that general landscape and that general Venn diagram of where all these things are intersecting. Now we can start to talk about the type of assets, the type of tokens that we can put together that are actually going to matter to fans. Because as much as I love the Premier League, the idea of a spinning Mo Salah or Harry Kane with his arms folded and again the lasers, I'm not interested in that.
Laser.
But what I am interested in is maybe accumulating 2 or 3 trading card style pieces, which in and of themselves aren't that dynamic, but maybe suddenly I'm given the opportunity to burn those 3 off to make sort of a more potent NFT, or maybe I'm able to burn those 3 off for the opportunity to go hang out in the director's box with another group of George and Barefields and Allans who are all interested in the same team or the same experience. So it's about driving experience, and it's about driving affinity to those brands in new and interesting ways. And what we're seeing right now is here's new and interesting way number 1, and then you kind of plateau and everybody sort of trades in that. And then here's new and interesting way number 2, and you kind of plateau on that. Mm-hmm. So it's going back to this generative kind of idea, but also it's just iteration on iteration. It's just smart people talking with themselves, and there's a bit of ad agency to it. There's a ton of kind of graphic design and that sort of design thinking that you're familiar with as a dude that did all that stuff growing up. And there's just a lot of passion and sort of understanding of the nuances of culture and how different audiences and fans engage with that culture. Because, I mean, going back to soccer, for example, there are soccer fans, right? But a band where you're just like all soccer and nothing else, that's a pretty narrow band.
Yeah.
You know, the 3 of us are all soccer fans, but we're all music fans. You know, y'all are hunting fans. I branch off this way and goes to photography and all that kind of stuff, but we still meet in the middle, and all of those influences input on the specific passion that we're talking about. So that's what I find really cool about the space, and also really cool about the work that we're doing at House of Attention, is taking the simplest concept and just trying to ramp it up and elevate it rather.
Are you seeing any traction with music NFTs with what you're doing?
To an extent, we are right now. We're interested in what the music industry is doing in terms of giving a lot of ownership back to artists and that type of thing. I think the crossover with music is starting to happen at festivals in the same way that it's happening at art galleries, right? So you say festivals, if you're at like Coachella or something like that, it's like you enter in, and maybe you're with your ticket, you are given a special minted NFT that maybe allows you to do X and Y. And I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but it seems to be tied a lot to the experience that you're having, and a lot less so to, again, okay, well, this is an MP3, and then, you know, my NFT allows me an NFT of, an MP3 of the album and a digital poster. It's not so much that. It's more about how can we take the digital and marry it with the real life and give that user a really cool experience. So there's a lot of rad stuff that's going on. And it's just about giving artists and the people who surround them the opportunity to be super creative about the what ifs that are surrounding their art, right? What if we did this? What if that was on fire? What if the 18 elephants came out of that area right now? Well, maybe all of that can if you mash all your NFTs together. Or what if this whole fucking audience took their NFTs of Coachella and decided to all burn them at once? Does that mean that fucking Steve Aoki is coming out of that corner? Or is it Damon Albarn?
Laser.
Right. Or is it Tape Recorder 3 reuniting? You know, it's those kind of possibilities in the experience realm are really interesting. And there's some people at our shop who their main their main gift is just coming up with these insane what if scenarios and giving people the opportunity to indulge themselves.
That's the coolest part that I've seen, is just some of the most insane scenarios actually coming to fruition. And who thought of this? What kind of team put it together to make it work? It's mind blowing. But like you said, you get a bunch of smart people out there talking. Like that was most of my education last year, was being on Twitter Spaces, just listening to people talk, just listening. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. You know, and then you go back to the drawing board. And the next time you're ready, you're like, man, I got this revolutionary plan I came up with last night. And then, you know, everything plateaued that night before. You're like, okay, y'all are headed in this direction now. Right. One of the things I did and let me touch back on it real quick about the artist side of NFTs. One of the really cool things that that I see now, as opposed to traditional art, an artist sells a painting, 100 years ago, they get that money and that's it. Well, you've got these smart contracts that build in these continuous royalty clauses. So I buy something, from artist X for $100, they get, whatever the royalties, $20 off of that. I sell it to you. They get royalties off that sale. You sell it to George, they get royalties again. And I think that's a really cool thing to help out the starving artist.
Yeah, the part's wicked. I think the other part that's really cool, and you touched on it a little bit, Jason, the idea of the community building and having fans being able to engage with artists. I love the idea of airdropping and that kind of thing. So pretend that, you've bought 3 of my photo NFTs and blah, blah, blah. And whether you sold them on or not, it doesn't matter. It's the metadata being able to identify your wallet as one that has purchased directly 3 or 4 pieces from my wallet. I can then say, okay, well, there's obviously somebody there who's interested in what I'm putting together. So how about for this little release that I'm going to do, that wallet's getting an airdrop no matter what. And gives the artist an opportunity to just kind of experiment. Okay, maybe these are my photos that I'm just experimenting with, or this generative art that I'm not really sure about, and I'm going to throw it over here and see what happens. So it's just a really cool way to stay in touch with people and experiment with ways that I think are largely consequence free. And like you said, you can make some decent money, and even if you don't, you can kind of just see things traveling along and sort of start to understand, well, there is an audience for the work that we're doing or I'm doing or whoever it is. And I think that's super fun.
There's a and of course I'm going to butcher it. Somebody's going to come with some research on it. But can you speak at all on the Creative Commons, the CCO part of the contracts at all?
That part I'm not familiar with.
So the way that I'm understanding that is, let's talk about, your highest performing, your highest selling NFTs, your most popular. Of course, you got your CryptoPunks, some of your originals, you've got your Bored Apes. That's the ones that a lot of people are seeing now. You've got, Neymar, you've got all your soccer players worldwide getting into it. You've got your Snoop, Eminem, all those guys are, they're buying these Bored Apes because it is a social status at the end of the day. They're paying X amount of money for this thing to be in this club. Well, whatever the club may be, and again, this is just my understanding of it, how Yuga Labs is who created the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Right. What they've done, they've given CCO, which is Creative Commons. It allows, instead of them limiting you paid whatever it was to have one of these Bored Apes, you can now monetize that Bored Ape however you want without paying them anything else. Right. You can turn that. You've seen people, since these apes are becoming more and more recognizable. I think I saw some in the window at Hot Topic the other day. I mean, you see them out there on basketball players' sneakers on the court. You see these apes and you're going, okay, this is something. And of course, the FOMO culture that we have, everybody's going to look at that and go, I need whatever. So one of the guys that has an ape, he opened a restaurant in LA. Yeah, it's like a burger restaurant or it's something. Yes. You've got people doing beer, you've got people doing lotion, you've got all these different things that you're allowed just because of this ape, and I think that that's pretty cool how they've made it a standard deal that said, and again, I'm butchering the language on it, but it allows them to profit and monetize off of something that they've invested in. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting. It
really
cool.
is. So that's another thing that you're starting to see. And then, this whole plateau thing that we were talking about, just over the past 2 or 3 weeks, there's just been this huge uproar in the artist community for sure. But I guess the collectors have decided that they don't want to keep giving these artists their royalties. They want to buy them once, give them the royalty and be done with it. And the artists are going, wait a minute, of course. And then that's what everybody's talking about, or it's what they were talking about last week. I'm sure it's something new this week, but just seeing that and just seeing how fast the space moves. Are you seeing where you're having to hire younger people who are more in tune with, I'm telling you, man, the whole, you see it more than any, the social media behind this, the meme community, the meme driven stuff. It's unreal just how hyper focused a lot of these people are. And man, when you come across somebody who's good at this, at the Twitter part, who's good at, pushing any of it, they're really good. And they're good in a way that comes natural. These people aren't going to school for this. It's a certain And I do feel like that it's part of the younger generation that's coming up, you know, your 20-year-olds, wherever they are on it. I start to see that more of them are a lot more successful and not only pushing different things online, but they're able to understand it and break things down for, you know, whoever's listening in a way that you can understand it. And I think that's just invaluable.
Yeah, there's a ton of young people that are involved in the space. And I think that, you know, at my age, it would be foolish to claim any dominion of expertise over social media whatsoever. It's just, to your point, it comes so naturally to people 1-2 generations behind us that, you know, I don't have the aptitude or the expertise. For me at this point, and this goes back to a lot of the theme of what we're talking about, the playing field is entirely level. You can be 17 and you can be just as much of an expert in this space as I am. I think maybe the advantage that some of us being more established in our lives and in our careers is experience. But that, again, that's no guarantee of success either. But there are tons of ideas coming from youngsters that are driving the space, and I think a lot of that has just become with youth, because with youth comes energy, and a lot of creativity and just ways of thinking that at our point we're a little bit more set in the way we think and the way we approach things, and that's that. So there's tons of space for everybody in this space. I think it's really cool for that.
Well,
so
it's really neat.
Go ahead, George.
What I was going to say was like a lot of these types of discussions that we're having too, I've heard these different things and topics brought up in a Twitter Spaces that you actually help host there, right, Allan? It's with the House of Attention. And, you know, you don't have to have Twitter to hear it. Allan sends me a link and I text him my comments throughout, and he's like, would you just get on Twitter already? I'm like, no. So I'm like, he'll kind of interject my comments. There's a Texan who thinks this. He's a dumbass. But it's really like I'm hearing a lot of the different artists you're working with, a lot of the people who are behind the, you know, marketing of these ideas of just talking about this new forefront, you know, and it's really fascinating to tune into those. And I'll include a link here, you know, as well. But could you talk to me about, you know, how you guys put this together, what your goal is on that, and just kind of get people familiar with, you know, what you guys are doing in that, you know, Twitter space there?
The spaces are basically tiny little workshops. So we have a meeting, a weekly meeting, and we just jam out on what we're doing for the week. And then when we do the spaces, it's basically a reiteration of that. We just talk about some of the ideas we've been kicking around. If somebody's got a little piece that they've written that's up on the company LinkedIn or whatever, we might go over that and maybe use that as a launching point for the ideas for that week. And we just riff on different ideas and again, it's all about just working through our impressions of the space and trying to, you know, we don't necessarily come to a conclusion at the end of the spaces, right? It's about talking with each other. Occasionally we have guests on. We encourage the people who are listening to jump in and chat if they want, because that space is as passive as you want it to be. And it also can be very active. And Jason, you would know that, given your own experience with them. I love them. I think it's great. It's like putting on a little radio show, and the consequences are, I don't really see them as being any consequences, because the format is such that it's just about exploration of ideas. And we often get ideas for future little pieces that we want to write down. We occasionally are getting ideas for projects or ways to approach projects, all that type of stuff. So that's the main gist behind them.
That's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. And that's you guys doing that Tuesday mornings, right now?
Right now, they're scheduled. We've pushed them to Tuesday afternoons at 2 p.m. Eastern is usually when we're doing that. And that's to accommodate more of the people on your time zone and a little bit further west.
Nice. Well, yeah, I'll definitely throw a link down here too, because they're fun to listen to. And I can give you Allan's number on the side, and you guys can text him incessantly as well. You're welcome. Let's chat a little bit more about that. Like, you were talking about some of the kind of interesting interactions in these live events with like the NFT and the world and the W3 world. And there was an example you talked to me about, and I had meant to ask you about it earlier and kind of get into it a little bit more, but I had kind of forgotten to, and now it's just dawned on me it'd be a good time to, with the NFT photo booth that you guys had helped create and sell to some of these events, these kind of conferences and whatnot. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and kind of how you've been involved in some of these? I know you went to, is it NFT NYC or NYC NFT? I always say it backwards. Which one is it?
We were at NFT NYC, but we weren't there with the photo booth. We did the photo booth at the Avalanche conference in Barcelona. And then we also did it at Consensus in Austin. It's basically, it's what you think of. It's part of it. Ultimately, with some of the things that we're planning out, it would be the culmination of more of a gallery experience that we would walk users through. That would be a mix of traditional and digital art, a big, large immersive space, and then the tail end, there's a bit more of kind of like a cocktail space, food, drinks, that type of thing. And at that place, the NFT photo booth would be there, and that would be to the culmination of your experience. But what we've been using it for thus far is, you're at a different event, you're with your buddies. And different photos are taken of you doing your thing. And then that photo gets minted, and we take them through the process of building out a wallet if they don't have one, making sure that NFT gets into their wallet. We also did one at ETH Denver where we actually had this big 80-foot screen where different bits of art was being generated by an animation engine using Unreal Engine. And so users could actually go in and use this physical thing to manipulate the art. You could choose a moment where you wanted to freeze that art. That was then captured and minted as an NFT and chucked into your wallet as well. So it's a cool way to mainly educate people on NFTs and what they are, and educate them on the process of actually opening up a wallet and starting through that process, because a ton of people are still pretty low in experience when it comes to that. And it's just a great way to capture experiences of the event that you might be at. And, it's a nice thing to be able to sell in as part of some of the other experiential pieces that we sell into different clients. So
that's so cool, man.
Yeah, it's a bit of a party piece, and it works pretty well for a lot of people. So.
Well, and we're seeing a lot of different events like that. I mean, I know we have a friend that we went to college with, Justin Bolanino, and he's putting together all these events where there's so much like the interactivity of art and music and technology and this, NFTs and this W3 space and meta world. And it's just fascinating to me to see how all this art and these conferences and events are coming together. And it's mind blowing. I mean, some of those kind of, 4D type experiences are things where you're walking in and the pace of which you're walking into a room will determine what kind of music is being played. And maybe your ambient temperature is then that controls the color of the screen behind you. And then as you interact with something, it's making some other type of musical interaction, like all these that you become a part of that living piece of art. And, for some people it's the experience and you've walked into it and you walk out and it's done. Sometimes you're left with an NFT or you're left with some kind of video, it's something that it's personalized to you or that you can purchase or whatever it may be. But it's just a fascinating space. I mean, I'm just blown away by that. And I know I haven't been to like a lot of the events that, other folks have. I'm just kind of seeing it whenever friends are, promoting it and such too. And it's like, whoa, I wouldn't have imagined any of these things 20 years ago. And
just
now
let your imagination run wild. That's pretty much the ticket, right? For if you got the cash, or if you can get somebody to pay for it, or a mixture of both, you sell some tickets, or sell some meals while they're there. However it is that you're going to go about identifying your revenue, in order to provide the experience, right? Then light it up. It's cool. There's a ton of stuff that's happening.
Well, and you just talked about like, meal too. And it kind of reminded me, there's Harry Rosenblum and his connection with you guys and working out Steak DAO. Is that
That's right?
So talk to me a little bit about that, because that's like a whole cool idea about how you can have this interaction with food and your NFTs and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, there's a big contingent at House of Attention who are not only foodies, but who have 20 years of experience opening restaurants and sort of workspaces, writing cookbooks, putting on insane experiential events to do with food. And Harry happens to be one of those. And he's one of his big passions is meat preparation, meat upbringing, table to, farm to table type of experiences related to meat. He's also a big Japanophile. So he's very interested in sort of Wagyu beef, and particularly he has a line on olive-fed Wagyu, and it only occurs on one island in Japan. And basically, farmers take the cast-off from pressed olives and feed their cattle that food. And in addition to it being free range and organic and all those big bywords, it has this olive-fed aspect to it. So it's this really, really, really beautiful marbled and highly exclusive meat that he has access to. So he set up a project where basically you're able to purchase NFTs at two levels. I think there's sort of a standard level and a premium level. And the purchase of the NFT gets you into that kind of traditional Discord community where you're able to access, some of the people who are involved in the project. There are discounts related to some of the, food preparation items that would go along with it, knives, cutlery, all that kind of stuff. But your NFT gives you access to purchase different cuts of that meat and various quantities of that meat. And basically what they do is when the NFTs are sold, they'll then be able to identify the number of cattle that they are then able to say to the farmers, we're buying these from you. And then the farmers will be okay, there's 10 of them, there's 20 of them, whatever it is. And then from the moment that those cattle are butchered all the way through to when they get the meat to the meat processing facility in California, you as an NFT owner are apprised of their progress. You as a member of the community are understanding where things are going. It gets to the processing facility, and then your meat goes out and it's fulfilled to you. You're able to choose your cuts, all different stuff like that. So that's the main functional aspect of it. And then you get into a little bit more of the out there far-fetched stuff with respect to pop-ups, with respect to online butcher shops that are connected to the project, and you're just developing this little ecosystem of meat dorks that are just loving everything about it, but getting a really cool experience related to their passion and related to food specifically. So it's a very cool project. I believe that it's being minted at the end of September, the first NFTs. We're going to do kind of a soft launch with those, with a view to being at Art Basel in some capacity, and also at South by in some capacity. And there will be some run-up events inside of those landmarks with respect to different pop-ups and stuff that we're going to do. So it's a cool project. It's very cool. Some really smart people and interesting people in the space are working on that one.
I did have a question for you though, Allan, on the photo booth. Are you getting the the blowback that we talked about? Are you getting people that come up and just try to talk shit? Or
there are always people that are going to talk shit. And I mean, like, truthfully, you can look at it for what it is, which is essentially a camera that's attached to a computer, that's attached to a custodial wallet that rapidly mints NFTs and sends them into people's wallets. And that is, you could call that a gimmick if you want to, but it's at this point in the game, it's a beautiful thing, because it's like those are two things that people want to hear, right? The idea of a photo booth at a wedding, great. And then NFTs on top of that. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful idea. I don't know that its legs are going to be there in 18 months or something like that, or maybe even 12. But the best part about it is that it's a sudden link to the whole ecosystem we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Get your wallet done on the spot. What about these? What's the fuck's a mnemonic phrase? Here it is. We wrote it out for you, motherfucker. Like, take it, fold it up, put it in your wallet, and you've learned something today. And it's just demystifying NFTs to a certain degree. And if it's attached to the experience that is related to the artist or to the brand, or if it's attached to us, again, great. but a lot of the stuff that we're really interested in at House is around educating people, and we're not trying to be like secretive with NFTs and Web3. It's we're in it to get everybody going on it. Because
so art and flipping and for whatever other reasons aside, I mean, you feel like there's a future, like you feel like this is the technology that we're.
I do, man.
Okay.
I think that this is where property is going to be exchanged, like physical, notable property, vehicles, homes, deeds. You already see stuff about fractionalized real estate. I don't know a ton about that, but it sounds a whole lot like a timeshare to me. But that, I mean, it's a concept like that made good. And like, you know, I think your knowledge of smart contracts is one of the most essential components of the space. And
absolutely,
I think that is where, you know, if you can code in Solidity, and if you can really wrap your head around how a smart contract works and kind of reverts back in on itself and then goes this way, and if you can get your head around how that shit works, and you've got a bit of an imagination, or you're tied to a few people who do, that, for me, that's the shit, right? Because that's where you can really let your imagination run wild. And because I think the PFP stuff is just like, that to me is AOL, that to me is GeoCities, and you know what I mean? And I just say that not to disparage at all, because it's a very exciting toe dipped in the water. But for me, it's it's all about ownership, right?
That's it. And that's how I feel about what you're saying on it too, just as far as the knowledge of the contracts, the smart contract. I mean, just in my industry alone, but you know, working in oil and gas, that's what we work with day in and day out.
Totally.
So many contracts, and the way that these smart contracts are putting it all out there for you, the way that they're giving you the receipt, the ledger on the back end, the way that all this stuff is transparent for all parties involved. I see it as future. I see it as, you know, I do believe we'll use it as some sort of voting technology. Just on all, like, definitely ticketing for events, things like that. I mean, I think that it's definitely the future on that. So I think that was more what I was asking. Are you getting people who are giving you blowback because they don't know, or people who actually come to the table and go, nah, this is bullshit because of this, this, and this? Or is there people that just go, I mean, I heard about NFT and I don't know what it means. So fuck. I think
it's mostly people who don't know. Truthfully, I think it's mostly it's such a foreign concept. And you mentioned it earlier, the idea of right click and save. Like, George and I have even been on other calls with buddies who have kind of thrown that bullshit out and been like, yeah, but here's why that's not right. And 2 days later, I just opened up a VV account, boys. You know, like once you get it, you get it.
Yeah.
And yes, I have some money tied up in it, and yes, I have some time tied up in it in terms of the work that I'm doing with House. But for me, like, it would be irresponsible. We're all a little bit ahead of the curve, but it would be irresponsible to walk away from it right now and dismiss it. You know what I mean? Because it's scary, or it's uncertain, or it's weird, or we're in this massive dip, because I don't believe it's going away. And I think that as more and more people start to understand it, and more people will right now because of the dip, because it's like, it's super cheap, and a lot of people are creating right now and thinking, the next time when we come out of that dip, it's going to become a lot more real to a lot more people. And I don't mean overnight, but like, it's going to become a lot more meaningful to a lot more people. And suddenly you're going to see it really start to go, I think.
Are you participating in any of like are you buying like ENS domains or doing any of that kind of stuff? Are you buying?
I've thought about buying ETH domains and that kind of stuff. And if I had a little bit more money, I probably would buy more of them. But, you know, any of that kind of speculative sort of parking of assets right now to me is really smart. And, you know, it's the same thing as buying food.com or pets.com or whatever it is, you know, just buying it, parking it, and, you know, somebody's gonna send you an offer when you're going down to see your buddy on the floor below you, and you're gonna have to sell it, right? So
that's how it goes. And George, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, it's basically like the .com days, where you would buy something, you know, mapmyranch.eth or mapmyranch.tez, something like that, where you have your wallets your wallets that you get, and you can point them to anything. I'm just using wallet as an example, but your wallet's going to be this crazy, alphanumeric set of what is it, 64, some kind of crazy amount of numbers and letters. You're never going to remember that to give to anybody. So if I want to send something to you, send you some ETH or whatever it is, I can just send it to mapmyranch.eth instead. You can forward it and point them anywhere. And you're starting to see these companies, I guess that, could be some of what House does, like, maybe offers them that as an example or something. But I want to say Tiffany's just did it. Did you see their drop they did? It was like nftiffany.eth or something silly. But anyway, so a lot of your bigger companies are buying into, like you said, food.eth or, it's really the numbers right now for some reason, man, like the 3-digit numbers, 000 all the way up to 999. Like people are losing their minds and paying so much money for those. I don't know if it's going to turn into phone numbers. I don't know what it's going to turn into, but yeah, there's people stockpiling these just like they did the .coms back when.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's nuts.
That is, I remember you talked to me a little bit about that because I think you have one through one of your wallets, and we had that discussion there too.
Yeah.
But it's it's fascinating, and just I remember when you were talking about too, like food.com, like there was folks who, when I think it was a reference to like when people were first buying domains, and there was a guy who, if unless it's just an urban legend, but there's a guy who bought like Walmart.com and McDonald's.com before the brand name got it. And then it's, they don't want to have like McDonald's.net or themcdonalds.com. They want to have like the name that is their brand. So what do you have to do? Someone else owns the domain. You got to buy it from them. And maybe there's a brokerage service or whatever. And because that happens nowadays too. If you look up some URL that you want to get, or maybe it's like your name or something, and you're like, you want to have it because you want to build your website, and you're like, oh man, someone else has it. It's like, oh, it's available for, $1,000. Or, people are selling it, they're listing it. There's auctions for them and things too. And so the same token too of what you're speaking with now too. I mean, there's a company I know of. It's a huge, huge, huge company in the outdoor space. And I remember looking on and, like thinking that, maybe we'll see them do some kind of world, NFT world stuff. And I saw that their name was not taken. And because I had searched it just to see if they bought that. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and pick it up. And it was super cheap. And it wasn't for the idea to flip it. It's because I know someone in that company there too. And I thought, I'd rather give it to them for $20 a year than have them have to pay for it later on down the road, much more for it. But there are people who are doing that, and that's their investment even in here. Just like, you're buying an NFT and hoping that it, quadruples or more, and you sell it and make some profit. There's a lot of people in this space that are finding ways to monetize their either experience or just being like, just good little salesmen, and women, they're, it's fascinating to
I think that's the key to what you said, man. People are able to monetize their experience, and not just monetize it, but mint it, if you would. I mean, put out more than just a picture, just a song. You're putting out an experience. Like he was saying, like you can, what does this NFT entitle you to? Is it does it make you part of a club? Is it just something to look at?
Private concert?
Yeah.
Awesome piece of oil-fed Wagyu steak. Yeah.
Any of that.
Got me hungry.
That's great, man. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I hope that we can, down the road get back together again and kind of chat about, what's happening with our trajectories of these businesses, or, whether it's House of Attention, whether it's the album that Jason and I are going to drop in like 2047. We'll get together and chat about these things too. I think we had a really good overview of these kinds of spaces, as well as, ourselves. And I think that it's going to be really beneficial for especially some first time, listeners of this kind of, this world and the NFTs and Web3. And I encourage everyone to go check out Allan's, hosted Tuesday afternoons Twitter space, and we'll have the link below there too with the House of Attention. And, we got a lot more, coming up too that we can chat about with some of your events you'll be doing. And, when you're here for South by in Texas, I'm sure we'll get together. Maybe we can the three of us can get together at the ranch, just down the road there from Austin, and, and shoot the shit there and record something live. That'll be fun.
Been looking for a reason to get down there.
There we go. There we go. Well, gentlemen, thanks a lot. Allan, tell people where they can kind of find you online and some of the stuff you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. I hang out at allanl.com most of the time. That's ALLANL.com. My Instagram is at Allan Lewis _. So same thing, ALLANLEWIS with an underscore after it.
Jason, where they can find you, man?
You can't.
I knew it.
Yeah, I'm not out there, man. I'm not out there like I was. I got an Instagram. It's Shuttleworth, HSHETTLE Worth, WRTH. Don't post there much. Just kind of get on, hang out, do what I do there. Same with Twitter. I don't talk much on there. Just kind of stalk and lurk and listen to spaces. But yeah, man, I'm learning. Still picking everything up. So even if that's what I can say to any of the listeners, any of the new listeners, whatever it may be, if you're confused, don't worry. I wake up in that state every day, you know?
Good stuff. Well, gentlemen, thanks again for this, and y'all have a great afternoon. Good talking with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, George.
Easy.
Thank you.